They were out early one morning, panning in the stream for gold, surrounded by the rising mountains. Old prospector with a tale for two, he brushed around in the pan, and pointing out what lay within was ordinary sand. He began with his story about 20 years before, and a younger man who sought his fortune. With a tear or two he told of searching for his treasure, but making known the gold he sought was ordinary pleasure. There were years of doing without, and there were years of plenty. He started thinking that life was never steady, excepting when the bills came in and he had no money to pay. Whiskey had never tasted better ordinarily. He concluded his story as it filled the air with a laugh, saying how he found the Lord and Savior, and how he found the river of life by which his day unfolds, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. Through His word we can see His wonders, signs and miracles of His love. Return His love with devotion, standing on His word before all men. We are His beloved and His chosen, walking in this life renewed with peace. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. upon his promises. Through his word we can see his wonders, signs and miracles of his love. We can return his love with devotion, standing on his word before all men. We are his beloved and his chosen, walking in this life renewed with peace. Trust in God, believe upon his promises. Trust in God, believe upon his promises. Believe upon his promises.
All right, God bless, welcome. I'm Mark Wallace, this is True North Studio, and today the topic is a healing walk through Jericho. Today we're going to take a walk through the ancient town of Jericho. A year had come and gone for Jesus and the boys. Tons of miracles had happened. Thousands of healings took place. Lives had changed. Jesus and a huge group of family and friends had just made a 3-day walk down from Galilee along the beautiful eastern side of the Jordan River. Everyone from Galilee made this trek 3 times a year to attend the required feast. They had one more day to go to make it to Jerusalem before Passover prep. All they had to do right now was get ferried across the Jordan River, walk through Jericho, and Jerusalem was a straight shot, maybe 17 miles uphill. Jesus knew that once he got to Jerusalem, he would be captured, tortured, and killed, which is kind of a heavy load to carry. No one else seems to remember this. The women and the kids were packing things up after breakfast. The apostles were staring into the campfire, listening to random people ask Jesus questions, keeping an eye out. Some questions they heard were good, others were just sad. Like the super rich young man who had just asked Jesus what it takes to have eternal life. Jesus gave him a few tips, which the guy knew he wasn't willing to do, so he just walked away, head down, to rejoin his own group of travelers. The apostles heard the whole thing, and even they had a little bit of trouble with what Jesus told the guy. Luke 18:26, and they that heard it, the apostles, said, "Who then can be saved?" Jesus said, "The things which are impossible with men are possible with God." Now Peter, missing Jesus' entire point, brings up what all the apostles were thinking. Then Peter said, "Lo, we have left all and followed thee." Well, for some reason, the apostles needed reassurance from Jesus as to why they had left their jobs, their wives, their homes, and were still following him, especially lately. Things were heating up. The religious leaders were turning people against Jesus. They'd even gotten some of Jesus' they even got to a few of Jesus' personal family. And Jesus said unto them, "Verily I say unto you, there is no man that hath left house, or parents, or brethren, or wife, or children, for the kingdom of God's sake, who shall not receive manifold more," that means super abundantly more, "in this present time, and in the world to come, life everlasting." But the apostles still had that deer in the headlights, gaze. I guess glaze too. Jesus recognized that faraway look in their eyes. It was time he told them, once again, what was about to happen. They needed to keep their heads in the game. Then he took unto him the 12 and said unto them, "Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and all the things that are written by the prophets concerning the Son of Man shall be accomplished. For he, meaning himself, shall be delivered unto the Gentiles, and he shall be mocked and spitefully entreated and spitted on, and they shall scourge him and put him to death. Then Jesus pauses, smiles, locks eyes with Peter, and says his money line, and the third day he shall rise again. Jesus really, really believed that he would rise from the dead 3 days after his death. His apostles, not so much. Wait a second. You don't believe me that the apostles didn't believe he was going to rise from the dead. Watch how God tells us their mental blindness in 3 ways. Verse 34, and they understood none of these things. And this saying was hid from them. Neither knew they the things which were spoken. They just couldn't wrap their heads around this Jesus dying and rising from the dead thing. Now they have to carry this information with them through this backwater town and up to Jerusalem. Also, be sure to notice how Jesus himself deals with pressure by healing a few people and giving sight to the blind. The first healing of the day. Jesus knew that all hell was about to break loose on him in just a few days from now. Yet he keeps moving, loving, teaching, and healing. But first they need to walk through the ancient city of Jericho. It's only early spring, but Jericho is already green and warm. In the first century, Jericho was subtropical. The Encyclopedia Britannica says that Jericho is one of the earliest continuous settlements in the world, dating perhaps from about 9,000 BC. Now, for you timeline fans, that means Jericho was a bustling community even during the Stone Age. The Stone Age. It was inhabited for 5,000 years before Adam and Eve. Jericho's kind of old. Britannica also says that King Herod the Great established a winter residence at Jericho and that he died there. That means that parts of Jericho were, fit for a king. Luke 18:35, and it came to pass that as he was come nigh unto, or getting closer to Jericho, a certain blind man sat by the wayside begging. The word certain blind man simply means some random blind man. This guy was unknown to Jesus and the apostles. Plus, he wouldn't have been the only panhandler at such a choke point. There were many beggars. For them, this was money time. This was Jerusalem feast traffic. This was payday. And hearing the multitude pass by Jesus and all the people he traveled with, he asked what it meant. Hey, you guys sound excited. What's up? And they told him that Jesus of Nazareth passes by. And he thought, was this the same Jesus guy who had healed thousands? Holy moly! So verse 38, he cried, he raised his voice a bit, saying, Jesus, the Son of David, have mercy on me. Now, did you notice that he was no longer begging? Now he's asking for mercy. Now, here's another important fact. Calling him Son of David meant that he actually believed Jesus was the Messiah, the chosen one, the Christ. At that time in society, there were many blind people. Now, according to the Vision Council, this is today, approximately 64% of adults use some form of vision correction, including eyeglasses, contact lenses, and or vision correction surgery. So maybe even a few of us would have been considered blind people back then. Now, here's a sad fact. In the first century, people believed that blindness was the result of you or your parents breaking your covenant with God, Deuteronomy 28. They thought blindness was due to sin. Some even believe that being disobedient to your parents could cause blindness, Proverbs 30:17. So I guess I only disobeyed until I needed glasses. That's a lot of guilt for a blind person to carry around. No wonder he asked for mercy. Watch how the loving disciples deal with this guy. And they which went before or walked at the front of the crowd rebuked him that he should hold his peace. But he cried so much the more, "The Son of David, have mercy on me!" A few of the disciples took it upon themselves to protect Jesus. They told this guy to pipe down. But the more they told him to shut up, the louder he got. He started screaming so loud that now his voice began to crack. Son of David, have mercy on me! When I was maybe 19, I drove across the country to hear a famous preacher teach a seminar. I wanted to meet him, so I looked for him after the morning session. It was a nice day, and I noticed he'd gone outside to sit in a lawn chair under a shade tree. Well, I walked up to him with my hand out, ready to shake hands, and two huge goons ran up to me like linebackers, and they basically tackled me. And then they manhandled me off the campus. They literally shoved me into the street like a villain. Pointing their fat fingers, they told me in no uncertain terms, "Don't come back. You're not welcome here." Hey, I just wanted to shake his hand. And then I'm kind of blind to ego-driven authority. I walked right back on campus and met the man later. You know, Jesus' self-appointed security detail demanded the blind guy shut up. Remember, they had just heard that people were gunning for Jesus. People were out to get him. They didn't know who or when it would happen. They didn't want to attract attention. Verse 40, and Jesus stood still and commanded him to be brought unto him. And when he was come near, he asked him, saying, What wilt thou that I shall do unto thee? And he, the blind man, said, Lord, that I might receive my sight. And Jesus said unto him, Receive thy sight. Thy faith hath saved thee. And immediately he received his sight and followed him, glorifying God. And all the people, when they saw it, gave praise unto God. It's kind of a big deal. Now, think the guy was blessed? Even Jesus' gang was blown away to be a part of this healing. Now, here's a tip for you, divine healing fans. It never indicates that Jesus ever touched him, prayed for him, or ministered healing to him. Jesus simply said, Your faith has healed you. Let me tell you a little story about this thing called faith. You know, in the 1930s, the best hitting baseball team in the Texas League was from San Antonio. And problem was, they were on a losing streak. Oh my. They couldn't buy a hit. The players were blaming everyone and everything but themselves. The dugout was super negative. During an away game in Dallas, Coach O'Reilly got an idea. At that time, there was a faith healer in Dallas named Slater, who had gained the reputation as a miracle worker. All the boys had heard of him. An hour before the game, Coach O'Reilly burst into the clubhouse and told every player to hand over their two best bats, saying that he had an idea that would help them win the pennant. Coach put their bats in a wheelbarrow and rolled it out of the locker room. 5 minutes before the game, Coach O'Reilly reappeared with the bats. He told the team that he had been to see Mr. Slater, who had blessed the bats and had prayed that they would produce hits. Now, the previous day, they'd only gotten one hit the entire game. But today, when they used the blessed bats, they got 37 hits, scored 22 runs, including 11 home runs. Not only did they win the game, but they went on to win the pennant with those same bats. Now, funny thing, nobody really knows if Coach O'Reilly actually even took those bats to Mr. Slater or not. The fact is, it really doesn't matter. The team believed the wooden bats were blessed. The real faith healing happened in the players' minds. Coach O'Reilly found a way to get their believing back up to the championship level. All they needed to do was believe. That's faith. The blind guy sitting beside the road believed that if he could just get the attention of the Christ, he would be forgiven and healed. That's some big faith. That's big faith. What you believe with every fiber of your being is faith. The unnamed blind guy at the eastern gate of Jericho was healed. The crowd grew. That was healing number one. The second healing of the day. Now the Gospel of Mark picks up where Luke left off. This is after the first healing. Mark 10:46. And they came to or into Jericho. And as he went out of Jericho with his disciples and a great number of people. Notice how they went into and out of Jericho. Okay. And and they went with a great number of people. The animated crowd went in through the eastern gate, walked completely through the walled city of Jericho, and walked out the west gate. After the first healing, the crowd grew as they walked through town. Local children were skipping and doing cartwheels. Moms were taking off their aprons and walking outside with hands on hips to see what the fuss is. Well, Jesus' group is loud. Then the townspeople see something else. They point their fingers and say, "Isn't that the blind guy from the east side of town? What's going on? What's he doing here? Where's his cane? Where's his cup?" The man who just got healed gets to see for the first time another blind guy begging. He saw, verse 46, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, who sat by the wayside, the main road, begging. This blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, was a well-known and well-liked West Side panhandler. He hung out on the west side of the city. Do you ever see the same homeless people sitting at the same spots in your city? Here's an example. Josephine always keeps a bottle of water with $2 under it in the cup holder of her car. She has it ready so she can give it quickly to one old homeless man who sits near a stoplight near her favorite grocery store. She looks forward to seeing him. He always looks her in the eye and tells her, "Thanks and God bless you." Now, if he's not there, she misses him. The fact that Bartimaeus is named probably meant that Jesus knew him. Jesus probably knew this guy because of his family's frequent trips through Jericho. Remember, Jesus would have passed this way 3 times a year with his family and friends every single year of his life. The guy, he held this west side spot a long time. Now the growing crowd bursts out the western gate of Jericho ahead of Jesus. Everyone lets the beggars on the west side of the city know what just happened over on the east side. The news about the blind guy from the east side being healed was spreading like wildfire. Everyone was talking about it. Mark 10:47. And when he, blind Bartimaeus, heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, the son of David, have mercy on me." Blind Bartimaeus didn't start off with a simple, "Hello, Jesus," like the first guy. He immediately broke into a full-blown voice-cracking scream. Why? Why? Because that's probably what the first blind guy said that he did to get Jesus' attention and get healed. Wouldn't you have? Wouldn't you have? Bart repeated the exact same words as the first guy. Exact same. The crowd was wondering if it would happen again. 48. And many charged him that he should hold his peace. But he cried the more a great deal, "Thou son of David, have mercy on me!" Once again, the cautious, unfiltered disciples told the second screaming blind guy to shut the blank up. Then many others in the crowd joined in on shushing Bartimaeus. And like the other guy, he just got louder. He just got louder. Bart went into verbal overdrive. The word cried the more means he screamed so loud his voice sounded like a croaking raven. "Son of David, have mercy on me!" It was as loud as he could possibly yell. 49, and Jesus stood still and commanded him to be called. And they called the blind man, saying unto him, "Be of good comfort, rise, he calleth thee." Again, you got to know this was not the only beggar at the western gate of the city, but he was definitely the loudest. Even the deaf guys were holding their ears. Like the first blind guy, old Bart actually believed Jesus was the Messiah. Watch this. 50. And he, casting away his garment, rose and came to Jesus. This is a big clue as to where Bart's head was at, where his faith was at, where his believing was at. This outer garment was their coat, their bed, their pillow, their shelter, and their begging mat. Like an open guitar case, the beggars used their cloak to catch coins. For a blind man to toss aside his outer garment, his coin-catching mat, which probably had money in it, showed that he believed that this was his time to get healed. And Jesus answered and said unto him, "What wilt thou that I should do unto thee?" Well, the blind man said unto him, "Lord, that I might receive my sight." And Jesus said unto him, "Go thy way, Get out of here, Bart. Thy faith hath made thee whole. And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus in the way, or on the road there. Wow. He was the second blind man to get healed that day. He too joined Jesus' growing crowd. Did you notice that once again Jesus never touched his eyes? Never prayed to God, never breathed on him, never took him aside for a solemn hand-laying, forehead-touching healing service? Jesus simply said, "Your faith has made you whole." Again, what does faith mean? When I was 17, I was on a canoe trip down the Brazos River in Texas. It was a slow-moving redwater river with plenty of places to camp. My paddling partner and I rounded a bend in our faded red canoe and saw a little tan blonde boy playing alone near the water. His parents were maybe 30 yards, inland near their tent under a shade tree. Now in Texas, there are a lot of things that can hurt you in the bush. There's rattlers, scorpions, fire ants, and more types of sticker bushes than you care to count. Just as we got close, as if on cue, the kid fell into a thorn bush and got stuck. He was screaming like a wet cat. So we rowed in. I hopped out of the canoe and gently pulled the kid free, thorn by thorn by thorn. And I carried him up to his mom, who calmly walked him into the tent as he screamed like the dickens. To my surprise, the kid's crying stopped instantly, and the boy came out of the tent, ran up to me with a fresh blue Band-Aid on his knee, and in his little Texas accent, he said, "If we put blue Band-Aids all over our body, we'll feel good all the time." Well, that's faith. That's faith. Faith is a knowing expectation. Faith is full on. Faith is being in the zone. Faith has no room for doubt. Faith is fearless. Faith is those blessed baseball bats. Faith is that blue Band-Aid. Now a second blind guy, someone Jesus knew, was healed that morning. The crowd grew even bigger. Even bigger. The third and fourth healings of the day. It's been quite a morning so far. It seems like two blind men getting healed on the same day at opposite ends of town would be enough, but Jesus was just warming up. I wonder how Jesus kept his head together, knowing he would be killed soon after he got to Jerusalem. The apostles were on high alert. Now we switch to the Gospel of Matthew for yet another camera angle. Watch this, Matthew 20:29. And as they departed from Jericho, a great multitude followed him. A great multitude now. They were now walking away from the western gate of Jericho and were heading up into the new suburbs, still on their way to the Passover feast in Jerusalem. Jesus and the apostles knew they were walking into battle. This side of Jericho is where the rich Romans and wealthy Judeans built their second and third homes. Remember, even King Herod had his winter home built there. Jericho was considered an oasis. It was called the City of Palm Trees. Did you know that Jericho is 846 feet below sea level? It's not just the oldest continually inhabited city in the world, it's the lowest. Talk about friends in low places. Now, Jericho also has a totally different weather pattern than Jerusalem, especially during the winter. There's a 3,320-foot elevation difference from Jericho to Jerusalem. Jericho is much warmer. Now back to our story. Hundreds of people and two recently healed blind men are surging uphill towards Jerusalem with Jesus and the boys. And the crowd's breathing harder now, not just because of the steeper incline, because they're excited. 30, and behold, two blind men sitting by the wayside, when they heard that Jesus passed by, cried out, screamed like the dickens, saying, "Have mercy on us, O Lord, thou son of David!" Did you notice that these two blind men were not begging like the other two? They didn't need to. After all, they were from the wealthy Upper West Side. They were only sitting there to catch up on the gossip and log into the internet traffic of the day, which was travelers. Now I ask you, why is it that all four blind men said exactly the same thing as the first guy, at the same volume? Why? Why? Don't you think the two recently healed blind guys might have ran ahead of the crowd and told all the other blind guys? Sure. These two blind buddies started screaming for Jesus, and the multitude rebuked them because they should hold their peace. These two men were so loud that the entire miracle mob shouted at them in unison to shut up. Imagine everybody in that humongous crowd scolding you to pipe down. Jesus' childhood neighbors from Galilee. You know, all the apostles' friends and family and parents, even Jesus' family, his mom and brothers, even Jesus' little sister told the two guys to zip it. Zip it. But the men kept screaming. That's what the other two guys told them to do. Like the first two blind guys, they called him Son of David because they also believed he was the Messiah. And the Messiah does miracles. They even added the word Lord for good measure. This belief in the Messiah separated these two men from the dozens and dozens of panhandlers who couldn't see past their tin cups. But these two were over the top loud. But they cried the more. They screamed even louder. Stereo. Saying, "Have mercy on us, O Lord, thou Son of David!" These poor little rich kids didn't want money from Jesus. They wanted mercy. They wanted healing. They wanted that forgiveness. And Jesus stood still and called them and said, "What will ye that I should do unto you?" And they said, "What?" No, that's not what he said. They said to him, "Lord, that our eyes may be opened." And Jesus said, "I kind of figured that." No, he didn't say that. Verse 34. So Jesus had compassion on them, and he touched their eyes. He touched their eyes, and immediately their eyes received sight, and they followed him. This is the first time that day that Jesus touched the people he intended to heal. Plus, there's no mention here of their faith making them whole. There didn't need to be. There didn't need to be. Josephine, our young son Adam, and I had been out of state at a Bible college, and we came back to New Jersey to visit Josephine's family for Christmas. We were invited to a party to reconnect with the believers. A woman with thick, dark, curly hair, whom I sort of knew, walked up to me and gave me a smile and a side hug, and so I hugged her back. I spoke with her for a quick moment, patted her on the back, and she was gone. She waded back into the festive crowd. Well, 2 years later, she sought me out at yet another Christmas party and thanked me for healing her. And I said, "Well, I don't remember praying for you." And she said, "You didn't pray for me." Now I was a bit confused. She told me that she had been diagnosed with a cancerous lump on her spine. And before she went to that party 2 years ago, she said to God, "God, I'm going to be healed at this party, but I'm not going to ask anyone to pray for me." She told me that when I placed my hand on her back and hugged her, the tumor got hot like a coal and then just disappeared. Poof! Then she told me that when she went to her oncologist, he said it was totally gone, no evidence that it had ever been there. Now, 2 years later, she was still cancer-free. During that hug, I didn't notice any virtue leave my body, like Jesus did with the woman of the issue of blood when she touched his clothing. I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea. I wasn't trying to minister healing, but she was expecting to be healed. She was expecting to be healed. I was the one that touched her that day, but she was the one who believed. That's faith. That's faith. We don't know what our words or our smiles or our touch can do for somebody. You don't know how much that post or book or handwritten note or song you wrote can do for somebody. You've touched more lives than you realize. We are ambassadors for Christ. We have the Spirit of God. Like Jesus, we too are sent to speak the word, to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance, and to heal the sick, Luke 4:18. And why not? You have Christ in you. 2 more blind guys from the Upper West Side got healed. 2 plus 2 makes 4. Makes 4. The final healing of the day. The final healing of the day. There was one more healing to go this day, but from a different kind of blindness. Now as a massive group enters the even more elite Upper West Side neighborhood of Jericho, a different type of healing is about to take place. Jesus was still well aware that every step he took him one step closer to his torture and death. But somehow he stayed focused on the now. I don't know how he did it, but he did. Luke picks the story back up. Luke 19:1. And Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. Again, entered and passed through. It had been quite a healing walk through Jericho so far. The animated crowd walking with Jesus has now grown exponentially. The air is electric. The crowd is eclectic. The mood is kinetic. Verse 2, and behold, or surprise, there was a man named Zacchaeus, which was the chief among the publicans, and he was rich. Zacchaeus surprised the crowd by even allowing himself to be seen. He was kind of famous. Now, a publican was an intensely hated Jew because he worked for the hated Romans. They would collect more taxes than they should have from their own people and pocket the rest. Think mafia. It was a scam, a con, a shakedown that the Romans allowed as long as they got their cut of money. Now, here's an interesting thought. The Apostle Matthew, once a publican himself, had to have at one time worked under this guy. I know this because Zacchaeus was the chief, the top dog, the head of the tax collectors for Herod. I'll give him a mafia name, Little Zack the Hat. And he sought to see Jesus, verse 3, who he was, and could not for the press, because he was of little stature. He was a little guy. The word press can be translated riot. This happy riot of Jesus's was becoming a moving, crushing crowd that people warn you against at concerts. Zach knew better than to get swept up into that human lava flow. Verse 4, and he ran before and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was to pass that way. Zach ran as fast as his little legs would carry him and climbed onto one of the thick lobe-hanging branches of a sycamore tree, careful not to scuff his new alligator sandals. Now he could see this Jesus guy he'd heard so much about. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him and said unto him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must abide at thy house. And he made haste and came down and received him joyfully. Everybody knew who the crooked little mafia don was, even Jesus. Josephine and I were having dinner at a restaurant in the small Italian section of Cleveland. And most of the people who ate there were locals and Italian. We were sitting there enjoying our delicious antipasta when all of a sudden everyone in the restaurant stood up and started clapping. And I thought, what the? You know, a well-dressed white-haired man in a gray suit entered and smiled and gave the please sit down wave. So everyone sat back down and went back to eating. Confused, I asked someone, who the heck was that guy? And the man paused, looked both ways, and he whispered that he was the head mafia guy in Cleveland. The head mafia guy. Jesus called out Zacchaeus by name and invited himself and his inner circle to dinner at Zach's mansion. And when they saw it, that Jesus was going to dine with little Zach, the hat, that means everyone murmured. Everyone murmured. That means complained out loud, saying that he was gone to be guest with the man that is a sinner. And all the people in the crowd hated this guy with a white-hot passion. Even the apostles, disciples, and Jesus' family all murmured. Yep, even Jesus' family was in that crowd. Mary too. He was considered evil, the devil, untouchable, tainted, dirty, low down, and dangerous. Now I love how it says that they all complained, that they all murmured. They couldn't help it. They couldn't help it. They all hated tax collectors, especially this guy. I better watch what I'm saying because I have an IRS agent who lives next door to me. You know, how would you feel if you were in this crowd with Jesus? How would you feel if the man Jesus called over was that politician that you hate the most? The one you almost spit at every time you see his or her face on TV. That's how the crowd felt looking at Zacchaeus. Just looking at him made them sick. Well, Jesus and his disciples all walked over to Zacchaeus' mansion for a meal. It was not quite as lavish as the king's winter home that they had just walked past, but it was comfortable. Servants prepared a small feast while Jesus and little Zach the Hat talked. And one of Jesus' apostles, Simon the Zealot, the apostle who wanted all Roman sympathizers dead, would have been seething with barely contained fury. Matthew, the reformed tax collector himself, just squirmed in his seat trying to avoid eye contact with his old mob boss. But some unspoken thing changed in Zach during that meal with Jesus. He felt clean and unburdened. He experienced a lightness of being like he hadn't felt since childhood. Zach stood up, as tall and proud as he could stand, to make a special announcement. His pretty young wife cringed. Verse 8, and Zacchaeus stood and said unto the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I will give to the poor. Zacchaeus, like someone giving a toast at a wedding, stands up, thrusts his drink in the air, and starts talking about giving away half his money. His wife drops a dish. And then he says, and from now on, if I'm taking anything from any man by false accusation, that means extortion, I will restore him fourfold. The words taken by false accusation are pretty telling. In the Greek, it means to squeeze money out of people by defaming them. Today we call it slander, racketeering, gaslighting. For young people, Zach used social media bullying for financial gain. But, no more would he use political blackmail to shake down the Judeans for money, using Roman soldiers as his muscle. Yeah, he was able to use the Roman soldiers to back him up. Like those 4 healed blind guys, something changed in Zacchaeus that day. Something finally came together in his dark little heart. Some unspoken spiritual deliverance happened. Even his tall trophy wife felt something clean and refreshing about this Jesus fellow. He promised Jesus that from now on, he was going to live differently. I'm going to give half my stuff to the poor, and if I ever slander anyone out of money again, from now on, I'm going to pay him back fourfold. Verse 9, and Jesus said unto him, This day is salvation come to this house, Zach's house, for as much as he is also a son of Abraham. That means he's a true believer. Verse 10, for the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost. I'm going to read that again. The Son of Man came to save that which was lost. That which was lost. Literally, today you and your family have been rescued. Now, the word salvation here is not the word for made whole. It's not sozo. It's more like a rescue term, like SEAL Team 6 stuff. Like the jaws of life kind of rescue. Like a Baywatch lifeguard, Jesus dove into the deep end and rescued Zach and his family from the judgment of the unjust. In closing, what a day, what a walk, what a Savior, what good wine. Even knowing that soon after he got to Jerusalem he would be killed, Jesus was still on the give. First, the unnamed blind guy at the eastern riverside gate of Jericho got healed, Luke 18. Next, blind Bartimaeus sitting at the western entrance of Jericho got healed, Mark 10. Then 2 blind men from wealthy families in the upper west suburbs got healed, Matthew 20. Finally, super rich Zacchaeus, the mafia don, was healed from his spiritual blindness. Now, sadly, the apostles were still blind to the fact that in a few days, Jesus would literally be killed and rise from the dead. 5 men were healed that day. All of them wanted it. All of them believed Jesus was the one who could cure them, rescue them. The only ones who didn't fully get it that day were the apostles. But we'll cover that in detail on Resurrection Sunday. We too have been rescued by the Christ and each of us has been given a job. Our baseball bats have already been blessed. We've been covered head to toe with blue Band-Aids. When we touch somebody, they feel the love of Christ. The world needs us. The world is as ready for us now as it was during the Jesus movement of the 70s, or the Luther Reformation of 1517, or even first century Acts. Now is the time to pass on your healing message to others. Now is the time to cure spiritual blindness with a clear message of truth. Now is our time to shine. Now is our time to shine. You may have aged. You may be busy. You may have physical limitations now, but for God's sake, find a way to spread the light, share the love, and speak the truth. So sing your song, write your book, somehow get out there and give the very, very best of yourselves. It's time for us to take a healing walk through the crowded streets of our own Jerichos. God bless.